Okay, so we've got a lot of questions to get through, so I think we can get started. Um, all right, so the first question, oh, and before we get started, I'd like to introduce, we've got our founder and CEO of Ezoic here with us today. Dwayne, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
All right, so we're going to roll right into it. So the first question that we have, Dwayne, is how is Ezoic different from other ways to monetize with ads on a website?
Yeah, so that's a pretty broad question. I think we're different from different parties in a number of ways. But I would say the first thing is just our approach. Our approach isn't just about monetization. It's about balancing revenue with user experience and speed and other factors. So a lot of the monetization solutions out there are just focused on how do I get a bunch of ads on the page, raise rates, increase revenue, but they're not really paying attention to how that affects the long-term health of your site. And it's really a one-dimensional, I think, way of thinking that a lot of those parties have. The second thing is we really think of ourselves as a platform, so we provide a number of different features and benefits that aren't available elsewhere. So we're really built around trying to help publishers and then have a long-term relationship with them. So monetization is one aspect. It's obviously a necessary part of being a publisher, but there's a lot more that goes into that. Content production, and big data analytics is, I think, the best analytics platform out there for publishers. Tells you about things like content length, how different authors are performing, how people are interacting with your content. We've got best-in-class site speed tools. We tie in SEO data into revenue, I think, in a way that isn't available elsewhere. Consent management. It goes on and on. And then the last thing is just with our approach. So our approach to making decisions on a website is via an automated system, and we make all of those decisions in real time for each user on each page view. And that's a lot different than if you sign up for an ad network and you might say, okay, I'm going to put an ad here and here, and everyone sees the same thing. Everyone gets the same thing. And the reality of the world is that that's just not optimal. It's not optimal for revenue, and it's not optimal for user experience. Somebody that's on a really small screen doesn't want a 970 by 250 at the top of this page where they can't see any content, just as an example. And then I guess the other thing that's kind of different is just from a business standpoint. I think we are very inclusive and open. We don't ask for contracts. We are built like as a core feature of our platform to test against other solutions. And the whole idea there is that you as a publisher should be able to say, I want to find what's best for me. I want to find what's best for my site. I shouldn't be locked in long-term to one party. I should have an easy way to compare what are the results of different solutions out there. And that was like our feature number one was, hey, let's split test versus others.
All right, so moving on, the next question we have is, why is Ezoic Premium invite only and not available to everybody?
All right, so we get this question a lot. So Ezoic Premium is really a program that is designed to simulate having your own direct sales, ad sales team. And then it also adds a bunch of kind of additional features on top of that. So with that comes with, you can only have so many sites in there. So if you're selling, to brands or to advertisers, there's a limited number of sites that we can bring into this program. Our goal long-term is to be able to open it up to all of the high-quality sites. And then the second part of it is it really requires sites to be committed long-term to using Ezoic. So if you're going out to a brand and saying, hey, would you like to book a campaign for October through December, there has to be some level of commitment there, whether it's monthly or yearly. So yeah, our goal is to try to get as many sites in there as possible, but it is a very kind of manual, labor-intensive thing. So it's limited right now.
All right. I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions just to follow up on premium. So one of the questions is, why do I have to pay for Ezoic Premium? And another one was, why do I have to pay upfront for Ezoic Premium?
Gotcha. Yeah, so again, getting back to the whole idea of trying to sell ads for yourself. So this was something that we saw over the first, 5-6 years that we were really around. Was publishers were either trying to sell ads themselves just on a one-on-one basis, or hire somebody or contract out to a different agency to do selling on their behalf. All of those things are really labor intensive, really expensive, and frankly, it doesn't make sense for all sites. And just to put in that level of effort, and a lot of time, people would get one campaign, one ad campaign, and they would say, "I got it. It's a $5 CPM, and it's great," but they didn't really factor in all of the expenses that went into getting that campaign, then trafficking it, ad operations, etc. So what we're trying to do with Premium is just to create kind of a collective group where all premium publishers can benefit from having that type of activity if they are one of those sites where it makes sense. And a lot of other companies charge 20, 25%, whatever it is, to all sites, and then try to bundle in some sort of activity, when the reality is that this type of direct sales activity doesn't make sense for all sites. So they're charging everyone and then giving the benefit to a few. So our goal here was really to create, clear, predictable, transparent pricing, just like if you were to hire a sales team yourself. This is my cost, this is my benefit, and you can just clearly compare that. And then I think the second part of that was, why do you have to pay up front? It all goes back to the same dynamic. So if you're selling to large advertisers or agencies, they'll often pay on what's called a net 90 basis, which means they'll pay 90 days after the end of a sales cycle. So June, you might get paid September or October. Ezoic, of course, pays out in 30 days. So you can kind of see the problem there. And then the second part, I guess, is just the sales cycle of, you do have to, have a team going out to, going out and try to find these deals and everything else. In the sales cycle, they tend to be booking campaigns quarterly, and then they run, and then you've got this net 90. So it's just really expensive. And it is really just designed to emulate you having your own team. And then the other thing too is that there's countless other benefits to the premium program. So things like yield reporting, which give you kind of best in the world reporting on just yield in general, detailed down to position levels, split segments, all of that stuff. It includes all sources, including native, etc. Site speed is included in a lot of the plans. There's a lot of things. So yeah, I know it's a sort of some contention. It's not the right program for everyone. That's really why it is kind of sectioned off. And I think, I guess, from an Ezoic perspective, what I can say is that the premium program actually costs Ezoic more money than we collect from it. And the idea there is that we know that it's really helpful for certain publishers. We know that this is something that they would want to be doing. And we're hoping that as it grows, we kind of get a little bit of economies of scale out of it. But right now, the benefit that everyone's getting out of it is much more than they're paying, and the amount that we're spending on it is more than everyone's paying as well. So.
All right, so this will be the last question related to premium. Someone threw it in a chat bot, but I thought we could answer it now. What are the conditions for being invited to the premium program?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of criteria. Typically, it has to do with just the vertical that your site is, the quality of the content, et cetera, and then if that matches up with where we're able to provide value. So with our premium program, every participant gets more benefit out of it from a monetary benefit out of it than the cost. So that's really it, is we have to be able to make a prediction and say, hey, this site's going to get a big benefit out of it, therefore they're invited. Another site might just be the reality of it, that we don't have something to offer that would be valuable, so then we're not inviting you.
All right. So one question that we have submitted is, why do publishers earn more revenue when they switch over to Mediavine or AdThrive from Ezoic? So it's their words, not mine.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing is I would disagree with that statement. You know, we have tons and tons of publishers every single day that come over from those services and have the, I guess, reverse experience. I think the other things that I could point to is that you know, just Ezoic as a whole has been growing you know, faster than those particular parties. Also work with more large sites than those parties. I know that's a popular misconception. But I think if you just get down to an individual site level and ask the question of, hey, why could that happen? The difference, there's a lot that goes into like ad price dynamics, and I'll get a little bit into that and hopefully not bore you guys too much. But in an ad exchange or real-time bidding, which is where there's a whole bunch of advertisers bidding on every impression, they're creating or determining what they're willing to pay based on historical data. So, you know, some of the key factors that they would look at in deciding their bid are, you know, historical click-through rate. So they have to bid on to show one ad. What are the odds that I'm going to get a click? You know, if I'm trying to sell something, that's what's important to me. Another type of advertiser might be interested in a viewable impression. So again, information that comes through in the ad auction is what's the historical viewability rate for a particular location or a particular site, et cetera. And if you're an advertiser, say there's a new series coming out on Netflix and you don't care if somebody clicks, you just want everyone to know, hey, tune in on this weekend. You just want to make sure people are seeing that ad. So that's viewability. So those are the two, you know, there's a lot more factors that go into it, but those are two primary ones that go into advertisers bidding. So at Ezoic, we use a lot of machine learning, a lot of big data to try to maximize that value. And that's a long-term value situation. So if you today took your site and all of a sudden made it so that a higher percentage of ads were viewed, advertisers don't know that is occurring. They don't know that you made that change until they have a history that demonstrates that. And that's what they're bidding on. So when you switch from one partner to another partner, what happens is you're taking all of your history, good or bad, along with you. So Ezoic works really hard at getting those metrics up. And then you move to another provider that, you know, puts more ads on the page or engages in different tricks that diminish the long-term value of ads. You will see an increase because those advertisers are bidding on the recent history. And then usually you'll see a tail off of that over time as they learn there's less value to those advertisements. And then we see the same thing when the sites switch in reverse, which is those auction metrics look poor when sites come to us, and then we basically work to build those up, remove the number of ads on a page, and increase that long-term value again.
All right, so the next few questions that we have are about Site Speed Accelerator. So the first one that we have is, why does Ezoic charge for Site Speed Accelerator when Ezoic is the one making my website slow?
Tough one. Yeah, so I guess addressing the first part, which is Ezoic is the one making my site slow. This actually isn't the case if you're using, you know, if you're coming to Ezoic and you have ad manager already running, you have header bidding already running, you have kind of a complex ad stack already running, Ezoic will be just right out of the box considerably faster than that. But if you are coming to Ezoic and you just have AdSense on your site, AdSense is a very simplistic ad setup, And there is additional latency involved in, calling a bunch of header bidding partners or having a more complex ad setup. So, so yeah, and our site speed product, we've really built this out as an independent product, which we've brought into the platform. It doesn't require that you're using our monetization. We have many sites that are using it that don't use our ads at all. So that's kind of another dynamic at play here. And then the other thing is, Ezoic just as a platform does a lot of things to try to speed up your site. So we serve all of the content from 10 different data centers around the world. So we can get kind of closer to the end user, similar to a CDN. We have caching. We have a partnership with Cloudflare for the last 10 years, et cetera. So yeah, we really think that our site speed accelerator is the kind of best of breed as far as site speed is out there, and we're really committed to making sure that keeps up with all the changes. Google in particular keeps changing the goalposts, and we're kind of continually improving and keeping up with the latest trends. So.
All right. On that note, if somebody does not want to pay for Site Speed Accelerator, is there a way to still optimize website speed with Ezoic? If so, how?
Sure. Yeah, so you can do all the traditional stuff that you do, but I think the main features that I would highlight in the Ezoic platform is caching. So caching is basically just allowing Ezoic to cache certain content for short periods of time, and that can really help with the latency and delivering that content to a user. So if you're hosting your website, it might be, hey, my server's in Texas. Somebody in Ireland is visiting the site. They obviously need to go through their connection from Ireland to Texas and back. With Ezoic, we have a data center in Ireland. So if you don't have caching on, so this is without the caching on, it would go from Ireland to nearby in Ireland. Then it would use kind of an enterprise level connection going across to your server in Texas, server to server connection there, and then back to the user. If caching is on, then for short periods of time, Ezoic can just keep the page content in Ireland, and it just goes Ireland to Ireland and makes that really fast. And then for static assets, so like CSS, images, etc., Cloudflare is another option there. We have a partnership with them. It's click a button and it's on, and they'll do the same thing through, I believe, they have about 150 different locations that are localized. So yeah, those are the things that you can do to really improve it.
Okay, this is a question from the Q&A, but I think it's good to answer now. Do you think site speed will be an issue in the future with the increase of internet speed, 5G, etc.?
I'm kind of a split decision on this one. So I guess there's two things. So one, yes, if everybody has a fast connection all the time, I think this goes away. But I think we can all speak from experience. A 4G LTE connection is supposed to be, I think it's 40 megabytes a second, whatever it is. Most of us have that on our phones. It's supposed to be everywhere. It's supposed to be, but yet, when you're at the store and you're trying to look up something, stuff's a little slow, or maybe when you're driving or everything else. So yeah, I think, and then 5G also is a very localized technology. It doesn't have nearly the range of 4G. So I think when you're in an area where you have 5G, you'll be better off, but I think we'll still continue to see the spotty coverage that we see now all over the place. So I think it'll become perhaps less of an issue, but still will be an important factor. And then the reality of it is, whether we like it or not, Google sets the criteria for a lot of this, and if they're saying, hey, this is important, then we all kind of have to follow suit.
All right. So another question that we have is, Why do Ezoic ads load slowly? Will it impact page impressions due to the delay?
Yeah. So there's a few things going on there. So number one, our whole platform is built on personalization and independent decision making. So one of the factors that goes into there is ad load speed and the time that we give an auction to take place. And those two things are balanced against revenue and against user experience. So we basically on a per case basis will say, hey, if we give the auction 1 second, how much revenue is that going to make you? Versus giving it 500 milliseconds. And we can kind of make a decision of that trade-off. And then in addition, how does that affect users on the end? And it's really important to understand that ads load in iframes. So that's basically separate from the primary content of the page. So the content is there for the user to start consuming, and the ad can load separately from that and doesn't affect that experience. And one of the things that makes Ezoic unique, I know it's going back to the first question, is we are a server-side platform. And what that means is that we're able to make these decisions before the user sees the content. So if you use a lot of other services, you'll kind of see that jumping around on the screen. So ads will load later on the screen, and the content will move around, which I think we all can agree we hate. And with Ezoic, you don't have much of that because we are able to make the decision and have the space there. So yeah, the system's just trying to achieve your goals, whether that's user experience goals or revenue goals. It's taking that into account, and it's a balancing act. And it can be done on a per person basis, literally. If the system thinks, hey, this person is gonna stick around, then we might allow the auction more time.
All right, so the next question was submitted. It says, I'm using AdSense and media.net on mediation, but it's always $0. I don't know why, and what can I do?
All right, so this might be an individual case that you need to look at, but I can say with mediation in general and those two particular companies, those are both click-based companies. So you get paid per click primarily on both of those platforms. So again, what our system does is on an individual basis, it will make the decision of, is this a situation where AdSense would make sense, or is this a situation where MediaNet.net would make sense? And the platform has also learned over time what those things look like where will this work and where won't this work? So for both of those, they would primarily perform well in high click-through rate locations. So, that may be a factor that the system just saying, hey, we don't have any positions that are high click-through rate where we think that these products will outperform, kind of a holistic CPM-based auction.
All right, so the next question we have is, how much time is needed to see revenue improvement? I started with Ezoic 3 weeks ago, and I have similar revenue to AdSense.
Yeah, so the time to take, it can vary very wildly based on the site. So it really depends on the site size. Our system is constantly testing things. It's trying things, and then it's looking at actual user responses in order to make those decisions in the future. So if you've just joined the platform, you can kind of think of it as maybe not the best term, but kind of like a bad scientist, right? It's like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and then I'm going to see how people respond to that, how advertisers respond to it, etc. And it can take, for statistical significance, it can actually take around 7,000 visits just to test one thing. So if you think about kind of true multivariate testing, where you're testing a whole bunch of things on a page, there can be thousands and thousands of combinations, and it takes time for the system to kind of gather enough data to make those decisions. So yeah, it's really about patience. For smaller sites, I always say a good 6 to 8 weeks is a reasonable time frame to really assess the results. Yeah, it's just the nature of it. It's a data-driven platform, so.
Right. All right. Our next question is, other companies are header bidding experts. They work with many ad partners and do things like dynamic pricing flooring. So why doesn't Ezoic do these things?
Um, so this is one that I actually hear every now and then. I kind of find it kind of funny, but so header bidding, I mean, it started in 2014. It really went mainstream in 2016, 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And there's a lot of companies out there that I really refer themselves, I think, as outsourced ad ops. And they say, oh, we're going to do this header bidding for you, and we'll bring in all these partners, et cetera. And I guess our position, Ezoic's position on this, is that this is standard. Everyone does this. There's nothing overly difficult about it. There's nothing hard about it. You don't need to pay someone to go and do this for you. And, you know, I guess it's kind of the same way maybe I'm showing my age here. Cars don't advertise, hey, we've got power windows anymore, because that's a standard feature. That's really why we don't focus on it. Everyone does it. You can do it yourself. There's nothing special there. We do it. And that's included in the monetization. And I think the same goes for partners. So the ad partners, there's 15 or so primary header bidding companies out there that are bidding standard. Everybody has the same ones. And frankly, they all make very little difference. I think, if you add in, Verizon as a header bidder, they might win 3-4% of the inventory, and that means they're outbidding everybody in an auction. So they win 4% of the inventory. On that 4%, they outbid the next highest bidder by, let's say, 10%. That's a 0.4% increase, right? So then you add another party on top of that, they win 1%, or they bid 10% higher, and it's a 0.1%. It just kind of becomes a diminishing return. But we do have all the same partners. We do all the header bidding. We also use machine learning to make those decisions on a per request basis. How long do we give these parties? Which parties should participate? And all of that. So yeah, it's a standard feature. I think if you get on a call with someone and they start talking about header bidding and ad partners and CPMs, run away. They're trying to convince you they have the best power windows in the market. It just isn't relevant anymore. You need to be way more advanced than that, and a lot smarter than just CPMs.
That's a good way to put it. All right. The next question is, why would two ads dilute each other? Isn't a bid rate based on the position?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I think bid is based on position, but primarily based on the history of that position. So we talked about click-through rate and viewability being a couple of those factors. So I think it's easy for everyone to understand that if you put more ads on the page, one can affect the other. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have an ad underneath the first paragraph on a page. So that's your only ad on the whole page. When somebody loads it, it's on the screen, they see it, it gets a viewable impression, so you might have 90% viewability. Now you go and add a second ad onto the page, and let's say we do one of those big leaderboards, a 970 by 250 at the top of the screen above the content. So now that has pushed down the ad that's below the content, so it's no longer viewable on the first screen. So the viewability of that ad has now went down, which means advertisers are now going to be bidding less on it, even though that top ad looks great, right? It's got really good viewability, prime position, makes you tons of money. But if you're not factoring in how that affected that second position, then you're kind of missing out. And then the other part of it, from a click-through rate perspective, is just pure math. So there's a lot of blending that goes on in ad auctions where they're looking at, hey, what's the normal historical click-through rate for this page, et cetera. And a user can only click on one ad. So if you have 20 ads on a page, they can only click on one of them, right? So that means the average click-through rate is going to go down the more ads you throw on there. And those are the types of decisions that our system is making is, hey, there's a cost to this action, both monetarily for the other ad units, but then also from a user experience perspective. And at the risk of blabbing on here, I would like to just give an example from a user experience perspective, because that's something that I think about a lot. So if you have somebody that comes to your site and we make a determination, hey, a typical user that comes to this landing page, let's say from Google, they're going to view 4 more pages in this session. And now we have a choice. We can put a big ad at the top, and we know when we do that, 10% more people leave the site. Okay, so this is just an example. So first page view, if we put that ad there, 10% people leave the site immediately, whether they click on the ad or just click back. That means we're now missing out on those 4 extra page views that we could have seen. If we had an average of 5 ads per page, we are now missing out on showing 20 additional ads for showing this one ad, which causes people to leave the site. So there's an interaction effect there where you need to say, okay, we might be willing to show this spot, but you're going to have to pay me a whole lot because the cost of this is 10% of the people leaving and not giving me 4 more page views. So I essentially lose 0.4 page views by showing this. So those are the types of decisions that our system's designed to make, and that's why we optimize on a per visit level as opposed to just, hey, this one spot's doing great. CPMs are up. It just isn't meaningful, and you really need to take care of the users as well. So,
all right, our next question we had on the list, but someone also asked it in the Q&A, and it is, where did the name Ezoic come from?
Sure. Ezoic, I know it's a little bit strange, and if you can't tell already, I'm kind of a little bit of a nerd. So, Zoic is a Latin word meaning like age. So you've got like Paleozoic era or Mesozoic era. And then E is for electronic, like an email. So the idea is we're living in the electronic era. And that's really what Ezoic as a company is doing, is trying to make that the best that we can.
All right. Our next question is there a way to see the value of each ad placeholder? I'm trying to decide whether I should keep the anchor ads turned on or if I should turn them off, for example. Where can I find this data to help me make that decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Premium, what we mentioned earlier, does have kind of placeholder level reporting in it. But I think the bigger thing to talk about in this case is we're already making those decisions, and we're making them on a very, very granular level. So what we would encourage you and everybody else to do is just give the system as many options to test as possible. And our system will make the decision of, is this the right choice or not for that particular case. And this gets back to kind of our core methodology, which is individualized decision making. So if you think about something like A/B testing, where you might try, I don't know, one size versus another size of an ad. So you run one size half the time, you run another size half the time, and then you look at the overall results and you say, size A was better than size B, so I'm going to put size A there. But the reality of it is, when you dig into the data, is a lot of the time size A was better for 60% of users, and size B was better for 40% of users. So when you look at it in aggregate, you're going to pick size A. And you're going to say to all those people where size B was better, too bad, majority rules, size A is going to win. And that's really what we're doing here. So even if you do have a placeholder reporting and you see, hey, this placeholder does 2% of revenue, that placeholder might be working really well in Sweden, and that's where it's being shown, and that might only be 2% of your revenue. But why ruin that? Just because overall it isn't doing well. So So yeah, I would try to give the system as many options as possible.
All right. Our next question is, does Ezoic work with existing AMP pages?
Uh, yeah, yeah, Ezoic works with AMP. And sometimes if it's a different layout for your site, you will have to set up different placeholders for AMP versus a regular mobile version of your site. But yeah, it's fully compatible. And that involved a lot of work, and including adding functionality into the AMP project itself. So.
All right, our next one was submitted as well. It's, how is Ezoic doing financially? Please be as detailed as possible. We want to make sure we don't leave publishers high and dry. It's happened before, and there are employees that, you know, people are concerned about. So.
Sure. Yeah, I understand where this question is coming, especially, you know, the way the world and the economy is going. So we are a private company, so I can't give specifics, but I'll do my best to kind of give a little bit of comfort around this. So first thing that a lot of people don't know is we're closing in here. This fall will be our 10-year anniversary. So we're not something that's been around for a year or two. Been around for a fair amount of time. We have 160 employees, 4 offices around the world. And then I think one of the things that makes us unique versus a lot of companies in this space is that we do have very reputable backers. So we're backed by 2 venture capital firms. So the first is Balderton Capital, which is actually based out of London. And they're $2.6 billion under management, back a lot of kind of the big names out there. And then if you hadn't heard, we also raised a $33 million investment round a little less than a year ago from a Silicon Valley company called Sageview Capital. It's a $2 billion fund and run by former KKR, which is a big hedge fund staff. So we have some pretty strong backers. But I guess beyond that, trying to think what I can share. You know, we're basically financially break even. We have 8 figures of cash in the bank. You know, I don't know. That's already a lot of detail. And I guess the other thing that I can talk about here is just my own history and the history of the group here. So this isn't my first company. My previous business was a company named Cubix, which was the first Facebook ad network. So this was back in the mid 2000s when Facebook opened up their platform to third-party application developers, and that was a pretty wild time back then. We're doing 1 billion plus impressions on Facebook a day, and that business was acquired by a larger company here in the U.S. I actually moved down here. I'm Canadian, so I moved down there as part of the acquisition and ran the social media division there for a number of years. Our CCO, John, that's actually where I met him. So he also founded a company that was an ad agency based in London and Australia. And his business was acquired by the same company, and we kind of met and worked together there. So I know that doesn't answer the question specifically, but we are kind of a little bit of a seasoned team. We've been around for a long time. Business has been around for a long time. We're growing. We've got strong backers. Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, can I monetize my website if its traffic is coming from apps published in Google Play and they are using WebView technology?
Yeah, so unfortunately, no, not as far as I know. I don't think WebView technology is allowed by Google Ad Exchange. And a lot of our technology is really based on that. So unfortunately, no, but that's a good question. I'm gonna have to go research that a little bit more.
All right, so we're going to come up on the last question that we have on our list, and then we can turn to some more of the Q&A questions that have been brought in by our attendees. So if you have any more questions, please use the Q&A function, and then we'll get to those in a moment. So the last one we have here is it possible to work with Ezoic when I'm bringing much of my traffic from advertising sites like Facebook or Taboola and other native platforms? And if the site was recently created and doesn't have any presence in search engines. So there are a lot of sites out there with this type of arbitrage. Can Ezoic accept such websites?
Um, yeah, so arbitrage websites. I guess this is a case by case scenario. This isn't primarily what we work with. We're really focused uh, on sites that have original and kind of high quality content. I'm not saying that isn't the case here, but that's the deciding factor. So if you're purchasing traffic and you have great original content that's adding value to the users, it's not a disqualifying factor. So yes, you can use Ezoic with these types of sites. If we're talking about a slideshow and the monetization is reliant on tricking users into clicking on ads because they think that they're the next button, then that's something that we would shy away from. So Ezoic just as a platform is really focused on kind of long-term relationships and building value for all the parties involved. So helping publishers grow their sites over time, helping advertisers get value out of the advertising they're purchasing, and helping users get value out of that content. As long as your site kind of will achieve all three of those goals and not just one side or the other, then we would consider you okay for Ezoic. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to point out of this too, is that with other parties out there, and they create these artificial thresholds of you got to be this big or this size or whatever to use our program. We're intentionally not doing that, and the reason why we're able to work with sites of a wider range of size is because we're able to help those sites grow over the long term. So if you have a site and it's smaller and you're getting going and you're adding content, we can help make sure that you're balancing kind of your revenue and the user experience and growing that over the long term so that you become one of those larger sites. And that's really what our whole business is about. We work with, I mean, the first publisher that ever used the platform still uses the platform. That's really what we're all about. We work with people for years and years, not weeks or months. So.
Okay, so going into some attendee questions, the first one is, why do we have very low ePMV for Nigeria and Africa?
What do you have? Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably just differences from countries as far as the demand. So again, our technology from an advertiser perspective is calling out to a bunch of parties and having them bid, and that's going to be based on the value that they perceive of the visitor that's going to the website, which can be influenced by country, and then the value of the content and the vertical that's coming through. So we see vastly different EPMVs by site. So we have some that are, $150 and some that are $1. And that really goes into those two things. What's the vertical value, and then those historical metrics that we're talking about with click-through rate and viewability. Can't answer specifically for your site, but because I don't know which one it is, but yeah, those are typically the reasons. It's just what people are willing to pay.
All right, we have another anonymous submission. It's, what do you think about auto load or next post features for articles? I assume it will keep readers on my page, but I noticed that Ezoic ads do not properly display on the next loaded articles.
So we do have a solution that takes a little bit more technical work, where you can have ads load, whether that's on infinite scroll or auto load, etc. What we've seen though from those types of things is that it tends to be artificially inflating the page views and the ad impressions on the site, when typically users aren't interested in what you're loading up next. But we can support it. There is technologies to be able to do it. I would just be aware of that just like the hey related articles, you might get a few percent click-through rate. That's probably the same. A few percent of the people are probably interested in actually seeing what you load up next, and the rest want to choose their own path.
All right, so our next question, I think, will be a short answer. Can Ezoic run alongside other ad providers like AdSense?
So there's two sides to this. It isn't actually a short answer. None of them are with me. So on the same page, typically we try to avoid that, except through the mediation feature. So you can link up your AdSense into Ezoic, and Ezoic will show AdSense ads in any of the positions when that's the best decision. So you can work hand in hand together with that. If you want to put them just separate on your own, we recommend against that, because it removes some of the information from the system, and the system's really built on data. However, if you wanted to test Ezoic versus AdSense, that's what we're all about, and that's and again, getting back to that point about AdThrive and Mediavine, it's really, really important, I think, to be able to do that. Anytime you want, you can go into the Ezoic system, change the traffic percentage, send a percentage of traffic to just AdSense that you've tagged up yourself or any other provider, and just compare apples to apples and see how it does. So you can do that with AdSense just like anybody else. I think that's really important, that publishers have that power and that ability long term.
All right, so our next question is, we know that Ezoic performance with AMP pages is not the same of mobile pages, but Google already tells us that in the future they will always prefer AMP and it'll be a main factor for ranking. What do you think? Are you developing the same way to improve performance on AMP pages? One thing I want to know is that starting next year, Google did announce that AMP will no longer be a ranking factor for their top stories highlight. So just one thing to throw in before you get started.
Yeah, that was going to be my first answer, is they've specifically said that AMP is not a ranking factor. Now, we all know that that's not entirely true, because they do rank those stories first. So if you're in a news-based publisher, it can make a big difference. I personally have a website that's news-based, and I know that it does help to get ranked in those news stories. But yes, that's going away next year. They've specifically said that AMP is not a ranking factor. They have said that site speed is a factor. So that's really it. It's just focus on, hey, let's make sure that our site isn't really slow, and it doesn't necessarily have to be AMP. As far as the question of performance, like monetization performance on AMP, there's a number of things that are done that reduce that. So number one is the way that AMP loads ads. They kind of take over control of that and take it out of the publishers and Ezoic's control. So that's negative portion number one. Number two, you can't run any major custom JavaScript on the page, so you can't do certain things. And then number three is it breaks a lot of data collection in that, because that first page view is always loading on google.com. And then if a user clicks on the link, now you're loading on a separate website. So cookies and kind of like user session stitching there's issues that work across those two that cause problems. AMP monetization is a challenge for everyone. We do the same multivariate testing, selection, etc. On there, we do run full header bidding. We do dynamic floor pricing. All of those things still happen on AMP. It's just kind of the nature of the product, of the AMP product, I mean.
All right, one thing I want to note, David, I see you sending some messages in. I see you put your email in. I'm going to personally email you after the webinar. And then moving on to our next question. This is a non-Ezoic question, but is there any relation to the NHL legend Guy Lafluer? Are you a Flames or Oilers fan?
My Flames or Oilers fan. No relation that I'm aware of to Guy Lafleur. He was a great player though, and I'm an Oilers fan. I grew up in a small town nearby Edmonton, about an hour away from there. So hardcore Oilers fan, and I hope they get back to playing soon.
All right, I think this might be our last question unless anyone adds more, but one person said, I thought the name server and Cloudflare integration was an either or thing. And that name server integration was the way to go. The reason I ask is I had an email from support suggesting I enable Cloudflare for server speed. Yeah, I integrated via name server because that was the best way to go.
Yeah, so there's two things here, and I know this gets confusing. So if you're already integrated with Cloudflare before joining Ezoic, there's kind of a single button integration. That's one way to integrate, and another way is name servers that you mentioned. But if you are integrated with name servers, you can still take advantage of some of the things that Cloudflare provides, like this localized serving of static content. And that's just a matter of going into settings and clicking to enable it. So you don't have to change your integration. You're still integrated the same way. It just allows Cloudflare to now serve your static content from all of their local data centers, which is pretty great. So.
All right, we have a couple more and we've got a few more minutes. So watching these webinars and interacting with publisher managers, I feel glad about your goals and objectives. Are there any current opportunities for those outside your current offices in the USA/UK, specifically working from home?
I love your enthusiasm. Possibly in the future, yeah. I would say keep an eye on. I think the world's changing as far as work from home. We're going through that the same as everybody else, and we're just trying to, right now. We're hoping to have some people back in the office here next week. We're just trying to get through it, but keep an eye out for postings, and I think a lot of them will probably be open more remotely in the future. I think that's going to be the nature of everyone, which I think is good. Yeah.
All right, we have another one here. Does Ezoic plan to provide more SEO tools and site-specific advice? Seems like it'd be helpful to both publishers and Ezoic.
Yeah, we've been working hard on a lot of this, and we actually have some tools. I don't know if they're available for some beta testing right now on SEO in particular. We've got some really cool stuff coming through that we think will help both with just determining what you can do to help improve your rankings, improve your search engine results, click-through rates, etc. But then also help provide some guidance on when you're creating content or refreshing content, what can you do? And again, we're taking a very data-driven machine learning approach of saying, hey, here's a page, you rank 5th. Let's take a look at the 4 above you. What are they doing differently? What do your most successful pages do consistently that this one maybe doesn't? And how can you change it? It's a big project. We've been working on it for a little more than a year and a half, with a whole team of engineers, data scientists, etc. So we'll see just the very beginnings of it here, I think, in the next few weeks.
Okay. All right. I'll give you guys one more chance to submit your questions. Otherwise, we've been through them all. We've just got a few more minutes left. Somebody wrote to clarify on the name, or sorry, to clarify on the Cloudflare versus name server integration. Is Cloudflare better for performance in any way?
No, it's not. They're identical. So you can either do name server integration and turn on Cloudflare for static, or you can have Cloudflare integration and it points to Ezoic. They're both the same. It's just a convenience factor if you happen to already be using Cloudflare. It's an easy to turn on.
Okay, we've got another one. At the 30-day mark from initial joining, do we get the option to yield the bottom anchor ad or choose choose a set percentage of ad revenue to play for Ezoic after our 30 days are up?
Yep, yeah, there is that option, and it's it's listed on the pricing page. It's right around 10%.
Okay. Well, if nobody has any more questions, I'll give it just maybe 30 more seconds. All right, I think that concludes our Q&A.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks everyone for listening. We've got more webinars coming out for the rest of the week and some next week, so just keep tuned.